All right, we are back. It has been a minute, I think. Time is a flat circle, but this is the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with Mitch Salazar. Event number 5 on the 2025 WSL Championship Tour season, the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach presented by Bonsoy, has just wrapped. Congrats to winners Isabella, Nichols, and Jack Robinson. And we are on the eve of CT6, the Bonsoy Gold Coast Pro at Burleigh Heads. I got to the Gold Coast yesterday, and the energy, it's pretty palpable on the ground here. Everyone's really excited. Mitch, you and I haven't caught up since before El Salvador, so what's been going on with you, and how are you feeling at this point in the season?
Yeah, Dave, everything's great. I wish we could just finish an event within, the first week of an actual waiting period and not have to wait till one of the very last days. But it's been a good year. We definitely had some great surf at Bells, not excellent, but I thought Winky performed when we needed it to. And I thought Bells definitely had a lot of opportunities for these surfers out there. Finals day was a bit difficult. We went on that long hole, then we came back and it had been pumping the last hour before we actually restarted the comp. And, unfortunately, the first couple of heats were really slow, but then it got better for both of the finals. And congrats to both Jack Robinson and Bella Nichols. Obviously, amazing performances, but competing at home, I think most of us know it's nothing easy, having all that pressure on your shoulders, and especially for Bella, back-to-back finals, winning her second event at the CT level, and for Jack Robinson, this is a major capstone on his great career so far. 5 years on the CT, already 8 wins, and multiple of those at home in Australia. So hats off to both of them, Dave.
Yeah, that's a great rundown. And you're right, it hasn't been an easy year for us. We haven't had 2 killer swells back to back running 4 days in a row. There's been a lot of we finished on day 13 of the window. We finished on day 11 of the window. Bells for sure was a lot of calls and moving to Winky and waiting for the bowl to get activated, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But great rundown. And it's been a minute, but I'm excited to see who you got for winners and losers coming out of the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you already know which my first loser is, and it's just Easter weekend over there at Bells. And, it's a moody time of the year in Victoria, and despite having great weather towards the end, there were a lot of days where it was raining, there was big downfall, the tides never helped either. But I think the most important thing was lack of swell on important days over the weekend, especially with the big crowds. You want to be able to really perform on those days when there's a big crowd on the beach. Unfortunately, the swell eventually showed up, but I'm a huge fan of Winky Pop. I know that it's costing a bit more to be able to run the event over there, but overall it's a quality wave. It's one of those waves that just offers up high performance for everybody. Stoked to see it a couple of days out there. Eventually we did finish at the Bells Bowl, which I thought was amazing. And especially for people having to compete at both locations, it really shows how talented and how mature a lot of these surfers are. It proves that at this point already. But yeah, first loser definitely has to be Easter weekend over there at Bells. I wish we could be able to change that. It doesn't seem like we will, but fortunately for us, we were able to finish the event in good waves, Dave.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Easter, thumbs down. Anzac Day, thumbs up. But yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't say never on the change. You never know what's going to happen. But I like that. I thought that was really well put. First loser from Bells for me, and it's not really a loser in terms of Bells specifically, but rather where this group sits with 2 events to go before the cut. And that's this bunch of rookies on the men's side that all of them dropped, a smidge at Bells, and they now sit at 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And that's Marco Migno, George Pitar, Jackson Bunch, and Al Cleland Jr. They're all sitting around the bubble. And so kind of less of a loser, but more of a hot seat for that crew heading into Burleigh Heads and Margaret River. George Pitar, famously, he's got CT experience at Margaret River. He finished 3rd last year, looked amazing. But Mitch, out of those 4 rookies, who do you see making it or not over the course of these next 2 events?
Man, I have the same second loser. It's actually the men's rookies outside of Joel Vaughn. Everybody lost in the round of 32 or earlier. It's a hard pick, though, because I feel like everybody's been surfing great. I thought Marco Migno had two events back-to-back that were just amazing. Quarterfinal finish in Portugal. Then he beat Real Wide in a buzzer beater over there at Punta Roca. I think Al Cleland has a lot of potential, honestly. I just think that there's been close heats that haven't gone his way, and the one round of 16 heat in El Salvador against Miguel Pupo was a chance for him to really break through into a quarterfinal finish. It didn't happen. The experience of Miguel played out in his advantage. Here he loses a real close heat to Leo. Could have gone either way in my opinion. I thought Al's wave, his best, was definitely the best of the heat. I think Grosjean is pretty much a done deal that he has to win the next two events for him to requalify. It's just going to be so difficult. He's in last place. And GP's kind of the wild card right here. Joel Vaughn's in the lead for Rookie of the Year race right now at number 12. There's no doubt that he's making the cut. He has 4 9s already. He's looked exceptional. He's competed very well. I think the one thing about GP is that he's great at point breaks. We have 2 of those coming up, and both of them are right-handers, but he just needs to be able to perform and push a little bit more water against those heavy guys. So if you come up against Jordy Smith, Leo, are you able to emphasize your power going up against heavier guys and stronger gentlemen so far? He's still super young. He's only 22, so his body hasn't fully matured to that point. But we're coming down to the wire, Dave. 2 events left. All these guys need to perform, and really has to be a quarterfinal or better in the next 2 events for you to gain your spot and stay there for the end of the year.
Yeah, no, that's a really good breakdown of all the rookies. And yeah, huge shout out to Joel Vaughn. He's had a great year. And really all the rookies have been surfing really well, like whether the results have shown it or not. Like they've looked really, really solid. So really good breakdown there. You might not like this next one, Mitch, but my second loser from Bells, because it's going to sting for you and I, but it's the goofy footers. Now, are you ready for this stat? Not a single CT goofy footer improved their ranking position at Bells Beach this season. On the men's side, Italo, flat. Iago dropped 1. Miguel dropped 2. Cole dropped 3. Connor, flat. Jackson dropped 2. Ian dropped 8. Ramsey dropped 3. David dropped 2. And Ryan dropped 1. And then on the women's side, Caroline dropped 2. Sawyer dropped 1. Aaron dropped 2. And Vahine dropped 3. So I thought this was going to be a good loser when I started writing these down, and I didn't realize how good of a loser it's going to be, where I'm like, not a single goofy footer improved their position at Bells Beach. So rough showing for the right foot forward brigade at Bells this year.
Definitely. And as you mentioned, I think Vahine was a big surprise to me. I was expecting her to perform better. I thought Sori Lindblad has had an exceptional year. She just came up in round of 16 against a very tough opponent, and having Sally Fitzgibbons run through a lot of the crew over there too with so much experience is difficult, both at Winky and at Bells. Jackson Bunch, didn't really talk about him too much when we mentioned the rookies. I thought he surfed great though.
I did too, yeah.
And we all know that Bells is just one of those locations that's not favorable for the goofy footers. In recent years, we have seen more champions, Wilco, Italo, and of course Cole Hausman in 2024, but right. I mean, as you said, not a single person being able to move up a spot, or, for Italo, he at least maintained, but he came up against Xavier Huxtable, gave him the inside at the beginning of the heat, and he paid the price for it. I still think he's the person to beat for the World Championship, but it's definitely something you can't do out there, and tough event for the goofy footers. I feel for them, and hopefully they can get a bounce back at Burleigh and, of course, in WA as well. Transitioning to my third loser, Dave. This is actually a pretty surprising one because I felt they had an exceptional event, the last one. It's the CI Surfboards team. And, outside of Brisa Hennessy, every single member of the team lost out early. You had George Pitar, of course. To me, really a key piece of their success so far this season has been Lakey Peterson. She lost out early too, and I truly felt that she was going to have a great event. But then you look at Barry Mamiya, still top 5 material. He's losing out in the round of 32. And I mean, just overall, McGillivray coming off of his first final, I felt like he surfed way too good of a heat over there in Punta Roca to lose out to Griffin in the round of 32 this way. And then if you go down the line, GP, Joao Chianco, those are 2 guys that have really done well at this location in the past, not this year. And unfortunately for them, both of them are really close to being cut from tour.
Yeah, no, it's a good one, and there's a lot of shakeup on the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings. I think we'll get to that in the next segment, but yeah, good call. Third loser for me coming out of Bells. It's a bit of a rolling loser from the last couple of events, and hell, like this year in general, but it's any edgelord out there that has been firing off hot takes about how South Africa's Jordy Smith is washed. And we all know how it goes. The surfing community is obsessed with the cult of youth. Everyone drink. We all want, the new this, the new that, and on and on and on. But when it comes to the 37-year-old Durbanite, he's the oldest guy on tour. there's just no evidence that in 2025 he's surfing at any level beneath the very best of his career. He's had a few slower years results-wise in terms of coming out of the pandemic and injuries and just the general chaos of, building a family while you're being a globe-trotting athlete. But I think Jordy has been and should still be considered a world title contender. He wins in El Salvador on his dad's boards, shout out to Smith Shapes, gets quarterfinals at Bells, and he's currently sitting 5th on the CT rankings. All this, mind you, after releasing, I think maybe the most mind-melting edit of the year called Plus 27 just before the season started. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. We're coming up on Burleigh Heads, Margaret River, Trestles, and J-Bay, just to name a few events left. So, yeah, I think Jordy is in the mix. I don't think he's ever looked as good as he does right now, and I think there's smart money on him being in the finals this year.
100%. He was super close last year, and, he has 2 nines, the win and a quarterfinal right here. And case in point to what you're saying, he loses really on the last wave over there at Bells too. I mean, could have gone either way in my personal opinion. A couple of judges said yes and a few said no against Morgan Sibilik. And shout out to Morgs. I mean, he did extremely well all event long, and all the wild cards really. Those guys ripped. Xavier Huxtable, Ellie Harrison. But Jordy Smith is not washed up. And anybody who thinks that is definitely not paying attention to the big picture. As you said, he's still releasing edits basically every single month. He's putting out a ton of content while he's still competing on the World Championship Tour. So you're putting your body at risk. You're maintaining that kind of composure during a free surf and in the heat. I mean, to me, there hasn't really been anybody outside of Dane Reynolds that has accomplished what he's done, both as a free surfer and as a World Tour competitor. Appreciative of him every moment. And, I love to see him in the finals. I don't think Fiji's the best location for him. That doesn't mean that he can't win. And, for everybody being a doubter out there, watch out for Jordy.
Yeah. So doubters, loser, Jordy, sneaky winner. So who else do you have winner-wise from Bells, Mitch?
Good way to put it right there, Dave. First winner, pretty obvious one. It's Isabella Nichols, back-to-back finals, second CT win ever in Western Australia, now at Bells, at home, in front of her family, first of all. And if you don't recall, over there in Central America, she actually missed her twin sister's wedding, Helena, because she was continuing to advance in the event. So she had to sacrifice missing out on the wedding to be able to compete. Eventually it paid off. She got second over there to Gabby Bryan, wins the event right here against the red-hot Luana Silva, by the way, who made her first final at the CT level. I think her showcase of her skills at this particular wave was on notice. Real good point break surfer coming from the Sunshine Coast. But the Gold Coast, WA, they're also going to be great venues. The best thing about this result, though, for her, Dave, she's up to number 4 in the rankings, looking real good pre-cut, and also for the finals.
Yeah, she's a great one. And I think that's right to call out Luana, too. Like, I thought she looked great during the event. I just think she really couldn't contend with Isabella in the finals. I think her approach, I think her equipment, I think the way she's surfing right now is really, really elevated. And so that's a great one. My first winner coming out of the event is it's the Bell. 60 plus years of this event, and surfing has changed a ton in that period of time. And back in the before days, you'd catch glimpses of Simon Anderson and his thruster, or the Aki Curran battles, or Aki and the Skins event, Nicky Wood, stuff like that. And the event always had, even in the pre-webcast days, like this aura about it. And surfing evolved, surfing then evolved, equipment evolved, high performance surfing evolved. And the waves, not just Bells, but across the world, that were previously considered high performance canvases, they kind of gave way to steeper, faster, more critical waves across the board. And that's not to say that Bells Beach, year in and year out, doesn't have its moments of like, oh man, this is a hard hang. But the bell and the history and the prestige and the juice around this event really does endure. We mentioned like it wasn't an easy forecast for us, but we didn't have classic clean Bells Bowl for the entire event. I kind of don't think we've ever had it for that event, but the event still delivers, and the surfing still delivers. And those final days in the bowl, even though they were a little bit unwieldy, you saw some amazing performances. And so for that reason alone, I think, compared to a lot of those events that were maybe on the calendar for years and maybe have moved to different stages of the tour, the Bell's the winner. Like, it keeps going.
And I know I talk a lot of smack about the forecast and Easter weekend over there at that location. Well, first of all, because it's true. But I do want to say...
It has the benefit of being true. So there's that.
Exactly. But that being said, there's something even more difficult than, there's a higher level of achievement, in my opinion, that you have to endure all those calls, all the setbacks, having to move over to Winky, to the Bells Bowl, maybe even Rincon at 1.2. And because it's a larger challenge, I feel like the reward is even higher. And that's why they have this event at a pedestal, right? On a pedestal, just because you know that the who's won. And whoever's won here has had an outstanding career, including Hausman last year. I mean, look at what he's been able to do in 18 months.
Yeah, no kook has ever rung the bell. Like, that was true before I joined. It's been true
damn straight.
Since, so, yeah.
And to your point, in my, experience of surfing now close to 18 years, I've only really seen 2 Bells events where we've had excellent waves from start to finish. That was 2009 when Parko won. He beat local wildcard Adam Robertson. Every single day was firing. I remember Fred Patashia was going off. Bobby was in the event. He was just guns blazing. And then, if I don't recall wrongly, I want to say 2013 when De Souza won. That's when Panda had the one heat, Haoni Monteiro had one heat that I think, they knocked out like Joel and all those guys, and it was just firing from start to finish. But, I mean, we're talking about 12 years in between that event and this one, and then 4 years before that. So it's just a tricky forecast, and the location itself makes it very difficult because it's so susceptible to wind, too. And another thing that never helps are the high tides right here at this location. So, shout out to the crew. They made it happen once again.
For sure.
Second winner, Dave, this comes to no surprises, our men's runner-up, Kanoa Igarashi. Led most of the final, but to me looked amazing all event long. He was one of those guys that had to compete both at Winky and at the Bull. We talked about him making the switch to JS. Boards look incredible. Jason Stevenson was actually there for the majority of the event. Had, real good attention to detail with his athletes. And he's up to number 6 right now in the rankings, making contention, and a big case for Final 5. We talk about him being it everywhere. He's so adaptable and clutch in moments. And, I mean, the people that he had to go through to make it to the final, loses a close one, too. I think some people could probably say that Kanoa won that final against Jack, but Jack having the best score of the heat, I definitely think it leaned towards his way. But he's going up into the lib, making things look real difficult. But overall, switch up to JS. His confidence is back, and I feel like he's going to have a great back end of the year. So cut's basically secure for him. Outside of that, now you got to win an event.
I love that one. I think Kanoa, he's been such a threat for such a long time. He always looked amazing back in the day when he was one of the prime surfers in the Channel Islands stable. And then he changed it up and he looked electric the last few years on Team Sharp Eye. And now recently moving to JS, he looks refreshed once again. So it seems like he's in a really great place. My second winner, I'm going to go with the Australians. So that kind of plays a little bit on my first winner of the Bells, but 50% of the event semifinalists were from the lucky country. We mentioned Isabella, Nichols, and Jack Robinson taking out the big wins. And, other notables, you'd include Ethan Ewing and Morgan Sibilic. They're in the quarterfinals, and a truly resurgent Sally Fitzgibbons on the women's side. Bells, it's such a unique wave, and it's a wave that is so ingrained in Australian surfing at all levels that you can... And for years, we've been able to kind of talk about this, but you can sense a truly special connection between the Aussies that have competed their whole lives and that wave in all of its forms. And so, ringing the bell for them, it just has to be like a huge life experience. And you can see it on the faces of Isabella and Jack, on the podium there. So, the Australians had a great event, both in and out of the water. So good for them.
Well, and especially considering the weekend that it was rung on. Anzac Day, as you mentioned, is a big deal over there. Not just that, there's a personal sense of pride of winning this event. As an Australian, all these men and women, they go through these types of rankings. Junior Tour, you have all the amateur events over there in Australia, which the Aussie titles, by the way, are really difficult to win. You obviously have a lot of talent from every single coast of the country. But most importantly, they have one of the best developmental programs overall worldwide. So you come up through all this talent. Once you make it to the CT, as we all know, it's much harder to stay there than it is to actually get there. And to be able to compete at home in front of your friends and family, never easy. But once you're able to do it and capitalize on a golden opportunity like that, there's nothing better. And ringing that bell, as you said, you could see their smile on their faces. And especially for Jack, this is a monumental moment for him. A lot of people forget how good he is in high performance style waves too. And to me, this event really showcased that because he had to go through different types of conditions. It's not WA, it's not Tahiti, it's definitely not Sunset Beach. And having this kind of element into surfing now, I feel like is definitely going to gain some ground with a lot of people that were really forgetting about the hype behind Jack Robinson. So stoked for him. I think he's deserving of it.
For sure.
To be honest, I'll put this winner at number one just because I feel like they do so much for the sport. It's Rip Curl. They sponsored two of our biggest events worldwide, which is the Male Rip Curl Pro in Portugal, and of course this one, the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach. The support that they've had for surfing overall, especially at this one for, as you said, more than 60 years this event has been running. Massive shout out to them. They put up with us, first of all. They make sure that all the athletes are well taken care of. The structure at this event is one of the best there is worldwide. And whenever you hear Hell's Bells, as soon as that first heat starts, it's one of the greatest feelings in the sport. So shout out to the entire Rip Curl team. Really appreciate what you do, and your continued support of surfing allows these surfers to be able to make a career out of this. And I know it's not a lot, but they're able to do something that they love. And because of that, I truly appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I mean, I think Rip Curl has been so committed to surfing over the course of their history, both investing in athletes, investing in films like the Sonny Miller's The Search series, and then investing in events. And I don't think there's really any venue on the planet that is as closely aligned with a sponsor like Bells. Like Bells and Rip Curl are just together. And I think it's actually helped them out quite a lot. A huge part of that company's DNA and success is around the fact that they have this special connection with Bells Beach. And, you've seen other companies have connections with other venues in the past, but just nothing like that at the moment, and maybe that's a note some other companies could take. I think there's a lot of value 100%. In investing in a community and a wave, in addition to your team riders, for sure. So great one there. My final winner coming out of the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach are the Vissla CT Shaper Ranking Challengers. We're going to dig into it in the next segment, of course, but we saw a really impressive return to form from Sharp Eye with Jack's victory, with wildcard Morgan Sibilic's quarterfinal result, and Jake Marshall, who I thought was doing some of the best surfing of the event, en route to his equal fifth as well. And then on the women's side, we mentioned Luana Silva. She made her first final with a runner-up finish. So congrats to Sharp Eye. And then, Jason Stevenson, you mentioned he was on site at the event, JS Industries, whom I'd like to say you and I have kept a sneaky eye on the past couple of seasons as they've rebuilt their program. They still have so much talent off tour, but they're investing in talent on tour, and they've cracked the top 5, I think, for the first time ever since we started the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings, on the back of Kanoa's runner-up finish and Samuel Pupo's quarterfinal result. So
wait, is that actually? That's the first time JS Industries has cracked the top 5 in the 3 years we've been doing this.
Man, you make me think it might not be true. I'm pretty sure. I think I would have mentioned it before. Just because you and I have been so laser focused on them being like, man, they need to be in the top 5.
That's crazy, though. I can't truly believe that. But how much have we talked about him making the move, opening up that market in Brazil with the Pupo family? And now it's slowly getting to that point. But they have too talented of a team.
And the move with Kanoa as well. That's a recent one, and it's already paying dividends. We mentioned the rookie Jackson Bunch, who is primarily with his long-term shaper of Minami, but has been getting JSs here and there. So I do think you're seeing the equipment is performing, you're seeing the surfers respond to it, and I think there could be a sneaky contender coming up in the next few years, which is great.
Well, they have surfers that are easily world title contenders, and they have a couple of rookies, as you said. Bunch typically rides Minami's, but during the Challengers, he did ride quite a few of JS's boards. And then you have Marco Mignot, who's truly a wild card. And both Pooper brothers are legit. I mean, Miggy's having an exceptional year, but Sam, big makeup at this event. He looked great. Overall, though,
Ramsey, Ryan Callanan, it is a strong team, and the equipment looks like it's working. So anyway, I'm jumping the shark a little bit. So that's going to wrap up winners and losers from the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach, and we're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and then we're going to get real nerded out on surfboards in this next segment. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back to the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with Mitch Salazar. We teased it before the break, but we are now officially discussing the 2025 Vissla CT Shaper Rankings. Shaper Rankings! We are into our third season of this. Quick reminder on how it works. It is a combined men's and women's rankings. We count all the surfers' results who finish in the quarterfinals or better. The corresponding shapers receive the same rankings points that their surfers get. Higher the surfer places, the more points that shaper receives. And we're tracking the CT Shaper rankings from the start of the season at Pipeline through the end of the regular season in Tahiti. And in addition to being honored the 2025 CT Shaper of the Year at the WSL Awards, this year's winner will be gifted an overnight stay and surf at Surf Ranch Lemoore, courtesy of the Kelly Slater Surf Ranch and the WSL. So Mitch, we teased it out a little bit before the break, but Lost had another strong event. We saw Griffin Colapinto ascend, which we hadn't seen so far this season, but we really saw a resurgent Sharp Eye. Sharp Eye in El Salvador, this is the first time it's happened for that brand in 3 years, did not put up any results. They had no quarterfinalists in El Salvador. I thought that was pretty standout to me. And they came back. Good showing here. We mentioned JS coming in. There's other interesting little bits and bobs too, right? We saw DH get a huge win with Isabella Nichols. We actually saw Jordy Smith get a result for Lost, his first for Lost, after winning the previous event in El Salvador on Smith Shapes. But what stood out to you at Bells? It's such a long event. There's so many different faces in terms of your performance canvas. We've got Winky Pop, we've got Rincon, we've got the Bells Bowl, we've got Clean Waves, we've got Messy Waves. From an equipment standpoint, what did you notice, Mitch?
Well, look, on the women's side, I think it's a mixed bag, honestly. You have Isabella Nichols winning on a DHD. Darren's been making boards for that location for a long time, 30 plus years. Tyler Wright making the semis on a Paisel. She's won there twice. That's really no surprise, but it just goes to show that John's boards really work in a lot of heavy water waves. Brisa Hennessy making the semis on the Channel Islands. And Luana Silva on Sharp Eye, well, she gets second place. But so far, Sharp Eye, they don't have a single female in the top 10. And they're really losing their top two surfers with Joanne DeFay and Tati this year. So that's a big miss for them, unfortunately. But on the men's side, things are looking real good for Mayhem, as you said. I mean, they got more than a 40,000 point lead between second place. But Ethan Ewing, real good for DHD. I love the things that I'm seeing from Jack Robinson. Massive result for Sharp Eye right there. But then you got Jordy, as you said. That same board that he rode for the majority of the event over there in Central America, he rode it to a quarterfinal finish, which easily could have been a semifinal, on the last wave of his heat too. But then you got guys like Leo, Sharp Eye, losing out round of 16. Same thing for Phil. So they could have gained some ground right there. But Jake Marshall, huge comeback. And you know that I love this kid. He always works his butt off. And, he had the best heat of his life out there. And just really nice to see him get the pace back. But longer boards over there at Bells. Winky, you kind of have your standard, typical short board. I love that the Bells Bowl got big, though. I love that there was a huge demand for them to ride something a little bit bigger. Same thing goes for the fin selection, too. A lot of those men and women riding with John Teflix, probably the most reliable fin that Futures makes, and just something real stable with all those bumpy, kind of lumpy conditions. But Team Me overall, this is an event where you definitely have to pack a couple of board bags because you don't know how big it's going to get. And I know they were saying 4 to 6 out there in the water. There were easily some 10-foot faces sets out there on finals day.
That's a really good point. And Mayhem himself, Matt Biolas, he's consistent when he talks about the way they build their team. He maybe it's a pot shot towards some of the other programs, but he's like, we don't go out there and headhunt. Like, we don't try to grab high-ranking talent and bring them onto the team. This is homegrown. These are people that have been riding our boards for a long time. And even with the case of Jordy Smith, that's not completely void of like a long-term heritage either. You know, Jordy's dad, Graham G-Star, he was shaping and licensing lost surfboards back in the day in South Africa. And so they've always had a very tight connection too. And I wonder what your take is on the Mayhem, Lost Surfboards, Smith Shapes sort of dynamic with Jordy at the moment. Do you see a version where maybe Jordy is just riding straight Lost Surfboards at some point this season, or is he going to kind of go back and forth? Because obviously Smith Shapes are working for him as well. He posted a big win in El Salvador on one.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think he's definitely going to keep that board in the trunk for the entire Australian leg. And especially come lowers, is if he's still in the top 5, I think that Matt probably has a couple of boards ready for him right here in Southern California. I'm laughing right now, though, because there was a post where on the WSL social, they're at Winky, and they're like, oh, do I tag Iago or do I tag Jordy, who's walking down the stairs while watching Iago have a warm-up at Winky? And then the team manager for Lost, Gian Bernini, is like, tag at Lost Surfboards. And I started laughing so hard. I was like, he's got 2 surfers right there in the same frame. But, you know, I don't mind that. And as you recall, Julian, Mick, all these guys, when they used to come to lowers, they typically order boards off of Matt and the rest of the crew. And I just think it's one of those things where you have an open mind. It leads to better results because you know that you might be riding something that you're loyal to. But if you feel great and comfortable on the other board, that's something that you should rely on. And I think for Graham, he's already done his thing with the local market over there. So if you're able to expand things worldwide a little bit more and make sure that you're giving the credit to the other person while still getting some of that value yourself, you're going to be selling boards in South Africa regardless. So might as well help things out for your son.
That's a good point. You know, we mentioned, you know, the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings. It's a combined ranking. The top 5 at the moment, Lost Surfboards, they're the 2-time CT Shapers of the year. They're out front with a healthy lead. Sharp Eye, they had a great event. They moved to 2nd. Channel Islands, respectable, but maybe not as strong as some of those other events for them this season. They're in 3rd. DHD is in 4th. And then JS cracks the top 5 in 5th. That's the combined ranking. If you take a look at the men's and women's rankings separated, there's some interesting trends, right? Like on the men's side, Sharp Eye is actually well out in front. They're number 1 just on the men's ranking, but they're 6th on the women's side, right? And we talked about that, how that Luana runner-up finish was a big moment for them because they've been struggling on the women's side because Tati's taken a year off, Joanne has taken a bit of a year off too. Where you have something that like Lost on the men's side, they're 2nd on those rankings. They're 1st by a fair margin on the women's rankings too. Really balanced program at this point. And we're not expecting the programs to change just because of the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings, but it does point out like the value of having that balance on the men's and women's side.
100%. And I think a key part of their team too is when you look at a lot of the young guys that they have. Seth Moniz doing really well here at Bells. He got 9th. Was 1 spot away from making the quarters. He's going to be pivotal for them in the back end of the year. Real getting barrels, and we all know that when it comes to Saquarema, it's unpredictable. It could easily be overhead, double overhead, and that's a location where he could do really well at. But as you said, on the women's side, they're just lacking some power, and I felt like Lulu personally really showed her confidence and how well she actually surfs. I mean, there's so many times where I've just been watching her heats, and I'm just like, I've seen you free surf. How does it not translate to when you put on a jersey? Because there really shouldn't be that big of a difference. But overall, I mean, you look at the combined rankings, and this is for all the people that give me, you know, a lot of crap all the time on social media, texting me. If you look at all 3 people that are just behind Jason Stevenson, Timmy Patterson, Chris Borst, and Paizel, all 3 of those people have 2 surfers or less on the World Championship Tour. So that's where really those dependents on a larger team really elevate the performance of the people in the top 3 right now. Timmy Patterson, though, didn't have a single result in this event because Italo and Al lost out early. They're still at number 6. Chris Borst has 1 surfer on tour. That's Caitlin Simmer. She's been doing so well that they're at number 6 right now. And of course, you have the other person who's at number 8, Tyler Wright with Paizel. Outside of John Florence, they didn't have a single male. They only have one female, and that's Tyler, and she's been doing so well. They're sitting at number 8. So shout out to all the people behind the scenes. They really do a lot of great work, because those are the people that we're celebrating. And we're talking about the people that work at Lost, the people that work at Sharp, the people that work their butts off over there at Channel Islands too. You guys are the real stars, because on average, I'd be saying that the people at the top of the rankings are probably getting at least 30 to 40 boards per year.
That's a great point. Let's switch gears on the board talk for a minute. We talked about the equipment we saw at Bells Beach. This is coming out on the eve of CT6. It's the Bonsoy Gold Coast Pro. And this year, the primary venue for the CT event on the Gold Coast is Burleigh Heads.
I know what you're going to ask me already. I already know.
The last day of CT level competition to be held at Burleigh Heads was March 9th, 2002. So 23 years ago, it was men's round 3 and 4. They ran in quote unquote 4 to 5 foot excellent waves. Mitch, you've been to all these venues, man. What is the key difference between the wave at Burleigh Heads and the wave at Snapper Rocks? And how do you think that's going to manifest in terms of the equipment choice for the world's best surfing, if it changes things at all?
Yeah, I think you're still probably going with high-performance shortboards. To me, with the way the forecast is looking, you got to be optional. And I think that comes to boards, to fins, really just everything overall. I remember, it might have been when it was still a QS about a decade or so ago. I think Owen Wright might have won the event, but Kersey was riding this kind of different looking board. It might have been an early twin fin of one of the ones he's riding right now. He eventually made it to finals day. I think that's definitely an option, especially if you're somebody like Joel Vaughn who likes to pop those straight airs and just keep the momentum down the line. I don't see that as being something bad. And we always talk about riding something alternative, presenting something different. Burleigh is a great wave. It's high quality and it's world class. But Snapper Rocks, when it's doing its thing, is easily one of the best waves in the world. So big contrast to that. It's a much longer wave, even though Burleigh has the chance to become really one of those leg burner waves. Overall, shorter period swell, I think, is something that we're probably going to be seeing quite a bit of. You want to be on something that performs in the pocket and is quick in transition. That's where I feel like both CI and Mayhem are going to dominate. But you look at the surfing of Felipe, he should be looking great out there. And watch out for those sneaky cats like Marco Minio on the Jason Stevenson boards. He likes those kind of waves, shorter, punchier. And I feel like Griffin Colapinto, after his result here, should also be one to look at.
That's a good insight. We should also mention that 2002 was right around when the Tweed River Sand Bypass project started. So that is truly the moment when Snapper Rocks and the quote-unquote Superbank was formed. And so because it was always a wave, but it was it didn't have a ton of sand. It was more of a longboard wave up the top. Kiro was more of the high performance wave down the bottom. And the Tweed River Sand Bypass project transformed that whole bank, and we saw the super bank, and it became so consistently high performance that there wasn't really a need to shift the event that far down, far up the coastline to Burleigh Heads. It's changed this year because the cyclones of a few weeks ago have absolutely destroyed the banks. I always hold out hope that surely not my beloved, but had to surf out there this morning, and still wonderful, beautiful morning, had some really fun waves, but it is really gutted out at the moment, and the same goes for Snapper Rocks. So it's a bit of a bummer that the CTs returned to the Gold Coast and Snapper's not doing its thing, but it's such a wave-rich region that we're fortunate we have another world-class wave in Burleigh Heads. And I think your assessment of the forecast and who to look out for and what kind of surfing to look out for is dead on. Before we go to the next segment, Mitch, I think it's worth mentioning that you yourself have been getting quite a lot of attention for your surfing out of El Salvador and beyond. You're surfing the big rig model from Lost Surfboards. Is that your go-to at the moment? If not, what else have you been riding?
It's definitely, the one in real good waves. It's a little narrower than what I normally ride, so I like to ride it with something with a real good pocket on it and with good amount of punch. So Newport on a good day, that's definitely a board that I'm going to be riding quite a bit. And down in Central America, it was the board that I was basically riding every day, except on super high tide when it was smaller. I was riding the Subdriver 2.0 in a light speed, which is basically an epoxy, but just, a bit over the water. Today, right here in Southern California, I actually rode the MR times Cali Twin. I rode it as a 2+1. worked great. I'm a huge fan of that board. But yeah, just been riding a little bit of everything. I also just ordered a Zippy board. I don't know if you know Michael Zippy from the South Bay. He passed away a few years ago, but their legacy is still continuing on. And I think I'm getting a chubby grouper, which is basically a twin fin that's like 3 inches thick. And I'm really looking forward to it because I've ridden one of those boards before, and it was one of the highlights of my life when I was able to get that much speed on a point break. So, fortunately for me, I live in an area where there's a ton of boards, but yeah, shout out to Gian and Matt. They've been making some amazing stuff, and I'm still waiting on my HP Puddle Jumper Pro. So hopefully I can get that before the event at Lowers.
Nice.
What about yourself though? I know you just got something brand new for the Goldie.
Yeah, spoiled. But I was riding the Dumpster Diver 2 and the MTFA back at home, and Dumpster from Channel Islands. So thanks to Britt and Brent and Mike and Sean and everybody there. I was riding the DD2 in Spine Deck, worked great, and then the MTFA in ECT, which is like their new kind of hi-fi epoxy that feels awesome. I actually, Brian Robbins Ruby from Futures sent me a link saying the Chapter 11 boys, which is, Dane Reynolds and Minnie Blanchard, Eitan Osborne, and that are putting out an MTFA like appreciation effort. So I feel very validated that I've been holding the flag. Yeah. Like
really?
Today, and I feel very validated in that. The boards are amazing. Over here, actually, I got a mod quad from Mayhem in Lightspeed 2 epoxy. I actually was radicalized watching Nathan Yeomans surf it last year at Lower Trestles. I'm like, what is that board? That thing looks incredible. And really sick board. And I also have a CI 2 Pro that's a great board as well, just standard polyurethane. So yeah, like I said, super spoiled. It's been tough surfing at home this last spring has just been like cold and windy and everything feels chopped up, but there's been little windows, and so being over here and the water's warm and the level of surfing is always so high, it's a joy to get to surf over here every time.
The Goldie, baby, that's what it's all about right there.
That's what it's all about. Well, all right, let's take a break to get a word in from our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to talk fantasy and answer listener questions. We'll be right back.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the lineup. I'm Mitchell Salazar, your part-time co-host alongside Dave Prodan. Let's talk fantasy. This year, the lineup pod is running a CT fantasy contest. We'll be playing all season long and awarding the overall top 3 fantasy winners at the end of the season with gift cards to the WSL store valuing $50 to $150. Update on the fantasy ranks after bells, Dave. From this event alone within our mega league, HP at number 1, 838.34 points. DJWF in number 2. Carl Rogers at 3 with 826.96. Very little separation really between first all the way to third. Then you have Paul Hanna 420, 819.42 his rank. And Captain _Cook 815.24 at number 5. But overall, within the league, major shakeup in the rankings. Number 1, Sam Beaches, more than 2,830 points. DEIF at number 2. And Captain Cook, who, by the way, got 5th during the event, he's up to number 3, Dave. I want to know what happened to your team during this event.
I think that's like the best Captain Cook Australia experience in history, maybe, just based on what I understand about it. But my team, let's see, at Bells. So my women's picks were Katie Simmers, Tier A. She's my power surfer. Probably underperformed for the investment that went in on that.
Definitely
Tyler Wright, Lakey Peterson, and Betty Lusakura Johnson. I felt like they're all pretty strong picks. And then on the men's side, my Tier A's were Ethan Ewing, who's my power surfer. I feel like I probably wasn't alone in selecting him as a power surfer.
Same as me.
And then Rio Waida was my second Tier A, which is a little bit unconventional, but like looking at the forecast out from the event, it looked a little bit, I don't know, like we'll see, like, and he's so fast and so sparky. I felt like he was an opportunity for me to get some kind of off the board points that maybe other people didn't pan out, but you got to take a flyer on these guys. They're that good. And then in Tier B, I went with Kanoa Igarashi. Very happy with that pick. Felipe Toledo, which I think is just a value at Tier B. Liam O'Brien didn't perform the way I wanted, but I felt like was a smart pick. George Pitar, GP. And then in Tier C is where I really made my bones. I got Griffin Colapinto and Morgan Sibilic. So went all right. I finished the event 430 in the lineup lead, which brings me to 370 overall in the league. What about you, Mitch? Who'd you have and how'd you do?
So I had a Gabby Bryan power surfer. She
so smart.
She did good, but I was expecting another W, honestly. Hey, she lost to Bella, though, so at least that's something. I had Tyler Wright, which was a great pick.
And current CT number 1, Gabriella Bryan, unofficial.
By the way,
team rider.
Congratulations. That is it's a big deal. A lot of people are picking her to actually be world champion at the end of the year, so watch out for Gabby. Sori Lindblad. Definitely underperformed. I think she's top 5 material personally. I want to see her get on a roll. I had a wild card Ellie Harrison just because she had done so well last year. I thought she surfed great.
I thought so too. That's a good pick. Yeah.
Men's power surfer Ethan Ewing threw it. Holy hell! How was that 190 out of the one turn? Jesus, man.
I think I heard and I think I heard Mick. I think everyone's just like, that's the best surfing we've seen at Bells. And when you're hearing that from the likes of Mick Fanning, there's no better endorsement.
He's only rung a few bells himself, so
he knows a thing or two about that spot.
But in my Tier A, in my defense, I had 2 former champions, Ethan as my power surfer, Italo as number 2. Italo eventually loses to local wildcard Xavier Huxtable. I had Robbo Tier B, so I got the champion. I had Felipe. He's surfing better, but still not to his level so far, I feel. I had a Kanoa. I thought it was a really good pick. I had Connor O'Leary. He was making a comeback in his heat, had an 8, and unfortunately lost out. And then Tier C, I probably should have gone with the older Colapinto. I had Crosby. And then sneaky pick, Ian Gentile. He did really well.
You know what? I was watching Ian mow through the field, and he looked great. And I'm like, he would have been a good pick. It
just suits his style that way. And both Winky and Bells,
Totally.
But in our league, let me check the ranking. Overall, I am at 197. So I am feeling pretty hot. Yeah, top 200.
That's pretty good. Ooh, okay.
I'm stoked. We talked about this event and how our fantasy teams are doing. What about fantasy for Burleigh? It's a wildcard event. As you said, more than 20 years since we've ran there. You have local boy Liam O'Brien, who, let's be honest, has underperformed this year. He served good. Yeah. But we're talking about one of the best styles on tour. Should definitely be on your team. I think he's in the Tier C right now, so pretty easy to get him. Tier B is, to me, really where you got to be smart about this event right here.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, again, I think you'd put some pretty safe money on the men's side with the bulk of the teams going with Ethan Ewing. Right-hand point break. He has plenty of experience on all these points. But you've got a lot of interesting guys up there, like Italo Ferreira, so fast on his backhand. And I think probably a wave like Burleigh Heads provides a little bit more of a hi-fi canvas than the particular waves we had down at Bell's this last event. Jack Robinson lives here a good chunk of the year, no stranger. Iago Dora, so electric. Jordy Smith, we talked about him. He's got that power point of difference. Kanoa Igarashi is on a heater. The list goes on and on. It's going to be really difficult. I think what you said's right. I think that the teams that perform really well are going to be the ones that can sort of use the divining rod and figure out that Tier B category on both sides, because I think that's where the points of differences are going to be.
And just to add to really the people that have been surfing way better than I was expecting this year, we talked about Rio. He's had 2 17s in a row, but Leo, to me, is still freaking on fire. He loses in a wave-starved heat, but I mean, dude, the guy still has so much power. What I see at this event, though, if we really do see the forecast the way it's going to be and has a lot of short period, this is where you got to go. Marco Mignot, Griffin, all these guys that are real good in short transitions. They know how to surf beach breaks really well, but they can also perform at a point break. As you said, Jordy might be one of those guys. Joel Vaughn could probably have an amazing event and really a breakthrough performance over there. He's really local to the area. I want to throw out a name, though, that just for everybody out there is definitely the sleepiest of the picks. I'm hyped on Sam. He's won on the Goldie. I love his style for these types of waves. And when he gets into a rhythm, he is tough to beat. And he needs 2 big results. He's still behind the cut line at the moment at 27. Needs to make up at least five spots. I feel like he's definitely one of those guys that you should be looking at, especially if the forecast looks tricky like that. Dude, when he won at Snapper, and he's made, back-to-back finals over there. So I feel like this is definitely a location to watch out for him.
Great picks. And congrats to all the lineup podcast Mega League fantasy performers. Mitch is coming for you. I'm coming just a lot slower, so we'll get there at some point.
Hey, I'm at 197, top 200 right now. Let's go.
Here we go. Look out. We're in the rear view, just way back in the rear view.
So let's get into our listener questions now. Remember, if we don't get to your question today, we'll do our best to get to you if you write us at the lineup pod. And once again, Dave, really appreciative of all of our listeners, especially the ones that submit amazing questions. Let's start with our first one. At Alexandria Stiegler. If Aaron doesn't make the cut, has there ever been no Rookie of the Year? Ooh, great question.
Yeah, that is really interesting. There's always a Rookie of the Year regardless of performance, and it goes into like the highest ranked rookie. And I mean, even back in the day, we had a couple of years, I want to say, and don't quote me on this, where, we didn't have any rookies that requalified for the tour. And so there was always one that was reflected, like in the history books. But those years are hard, right? Because if the rookie class, none of them performed to the point where they've requalified, do they really earn the honor? I think they do, because there's such a huge performance jump from the QS and the CS to the CT. And with regards to Erin, right, she's sitting 10th on the rankings right now, right at the cut line. She's just underneath. We'll see how she goes. I actually saw her out at Duranbah paddling out when I got in this morning. She's with her coach, Jake Patterson. That guy knows a thing or two about surfing at this level and competing at this level. The next 2 events are Burleigh Heads and Margaret River. So anything can happen. I think the fields on both the men's and women's sides right now are so good. But one thing to consider on the women's side, even if Erin doesn't make the cut line, finishes 11th or higher after Margaret River, because the women's field's moving from 18 to 24 in 2026, she actually has to finish in the top 14 to make next year's tour. So there's going to be 4 surfers on the women's tour this year that do not make the cut to advance past Margaret River, but have made the cut for qualifying for 2026.
So they won't surf the back end of 2025, but they'll be surfing the first half of 26.
Correct. They get a bit of an extended holiday before next season.
Understood. And also, there are a few more actual true rookies on the women's side. Bella Kenworthy, and of course, Vagina Fierro, who's still in the mix. She's at number 14 right now. So there is a chance for them to win Rookie of the Year. The men's side is really competitive, but there are 4 19 to 22 at the moment. Mignot, Pitar, Bunch, and Cleland. And then so far, who's leading that race is Joel Vaughn. So, it's going to be really interesting and fun. And I think this is one of the best classes we've seen. I know everybody hasn't gotten the results so far, but they've been surfing, and they've been surfing well. And I think that's really the main thing that you want to look at, because say they do drop off tour this year, not making the cut, you go straight to the challengers, and you've already gotten all that experience of competing at the CT against the world's best. And I think this class, especially going up against the likes of Jordy, who's making a resurgence, you have Rio, who's having to come back here, Leo, who's making a run. Like, there's just so much talent. And that's the difficult thing about tour, is that it's definitely not the same as the challenger or the QS. And Levi Slauson said it the best over there in Central America. Everything is really just magnified at this level, but especially your mistakes. So minimizing mistakes is really the obvious thing right here. Our second question, Dave, at Santo.Ricardo. Should competitive surfing have weight classes / divisions like boxing? Hey, look, I'm in the 200 plus category, so if it does end up happening, I might have to make a comeback when competing.
It's an interesting question. I mean, I guess the way you look at it now, there are divisions, soft divisions based on like age and maturity, right? You've got the pro juniors, you got the QS, you got the CS, you got the CT. Of course, there's outliers in one direction typically that might kind of matriculate faster than others. I think that kind of levels the playing fields a lot. I guess, like, if you're thinking about it, the reason that you would potentially, it might be two reasons that you would want different weight classes or divisions like you would in boxing is there a disadvantage for smaller surfers when it comes to power surfing, or is there a disadvantage for bigger surfers when it comes to, smaller conditions, etc.? I think if you look over the course of the last several decades, there really isn't, like, especially I'll start with the power surfing piece. Like, there are physically smaller people who are amazing power surfers. Like, Rob Machado is not a very big guy. He can throw a lot of water. Kelly Slater's not a very big guy. He can throw a lot of water. The great Shane Herring, recently deceased, rest in peace, very small guy, power surfer all the way. And so I think in surfing, it's not so much about, am I the tallest? Do I weigh the most? Do I have the most muscle? But, do I have the physique and the strength and the flexibility, and is my approach and my equipment so dialed that I can maximize this canvas, right, from a power surfing position? And then on the other side of it, are the bigger surfers disadvantaged in smaller waves? Yes and no. I think if you look just in the advances in equipment, in health and well-being and physicality, the surfers on tour that have performed really well over the last few years, you look at your Gabriel Medinas and your John Florences, your Owen Wrights, your Dane Reynolds, your Jordy Smiths, they're physically bigger surfers on average than you would have seen 20 years ago when the equipment maybe wasn't there, etc. So it's a great question. I don't think we should have different divisions based on weight class. But Mitch, you're closer to this competitively than I am, so what do you think?
Well, like, it's an amazing question. I'm actually surprised that nobody had asked it sooner. I don't see it happening, unfortunately. But as you said, I think there's probably some things that benefit other surfers than most. But I could make the same kind of case for somebody like Owen Wright, who has the perfect body for a surfer. He's 6'3", has the longest arms and longest legs, so his paddling ability is right there. He's super lean. And of course,
he can get super low too for being such a tall guy. Like, that's the key, is like, even if you don't like naturally have a low center of gravity, if your flexibility and your strength and your core strength is at a level where you can get that low and get that much leverage, then you do have an advantage at that point. Like,
100%. And I've struggled with that my whole life. I mean, I grew up doing a lot of different sports, and every now and then I'll still be, quite straight-legged, even though I try not to. But, I think flexibility is the most important thing, as you're mentioning. And I also think that's why there's so much longevity within a lot of these guys' career. I think that's why Jordy's been performing so well. He still stretches every single day. He keeps his body in shape. And, of course, Kelly is, 53 now. And for him to have done this for 30-plus years at the highest of levels with a lot of success just goes to show you that, despite your size, despite your weight, like, you can be competing and be successful at any level, regardless of that. And especially I think it comes, because I'm pretty sure the question got asked for bigger guys. But look at Pandinha, he was always bigger. He wasn't necessarily the tallest, but he was chunky and
But
very
then you look at him
powerful.
surf like gutless Huntington Beach at the U.S. Open, and he looked
He made
insane.
the final. Yeah,
Yeah,
he made
right?
the final.
So, I don't think there's any disadvantage if you put the work in on either side of the physicality spectrum.
Well, and Kelly's 5'9" at the most, and he's won.
He's gonna listen to that part. We're gonna get some notes.
But it's true. He's won the Eddie. He's won a pipe, and he's won in Tahiti. Like, it's just like,
he's won everywhere.
If you put your mind to it, I think eventually you'll just get to that point. And even Italo, he's not the tallest of guys. He can throw a ton of spray, and I think it comes down to timing a lot, honestly, and just repetition. But it's a great question, and really appreciate it, Santo da Ricardo, because it honestly hasn't been brought up enough, I feel. And it's something that I think a lot of people have probably been thinking about. Our last question, Dave. At Sandspit, after just a few events, looking at the results, we could be facing the end of the Brazilian storm? Ooh, I don't know about that, but good question.
Spicy question. Yeah. I mean, we look at the women's side first. That's probably simpler. We mentioned Tatiana Weston Webb. She's a consistent world title contender from Brazil. This year she's taken a year off. Luana Silva, she's in her second crack at the championship tour. Didn't have the greatest start, but just had her runner-up finish, so I'd say that she's probably ascendant. I think the Brazilian Storm typically hasn't had a ton of representation percentage-wise on the women's tour. It's more the men, and I wouldn't say we're entering the end of the Brazilian Storm or seeing the end of it. I mean, Italo Ferreira is the number one surfer on the planet at the moment, and he looks every bit of it. Iago Dora, he's fourth at the moment. He looks like he could be a world title contender in the finals this year. And then you do see a bit of a drop-off, right? Like Miguel Pupo, he's at ninth. He's certainly like a CT winner in the past. I think Felipe Toledo, people have been eyeing him pretty closely this year. Two-time world champion. He took a year off last year. He's back this year. And I think we mentioned it before. It's not that he's surfing bad, but relative to what he's achieved in the past, like consistent wins, consistent finals, multiple world titles, it does feel like he's surfing a bit below his potential. And then you look at someone like Zhao Xianca that, was ascendant a few years ago. He's just below the cut line right now at 23. Ian Gouveia, we mentioned, he dropped 8 spots after Bells Beach. And then you got Samuel Pupo, Alejo Muñez at 27, 28, David Silva at 31st, and Edgard Groja at 34. I think another thing that might be coloring people's perspectives of the Brazilian Storm or sort of its diminishment this season, 3-time world champion Gabriel Medina has yet to surf a heat this year. So I think it's in a different phase from where it was 5 years ago. But I think it's still so strong. And I think the buildup that led to the Brazilian Storm era several years ago, it didn't happen overnight. Like, this was decades in the making. It was investment in domestic series. It was investment in a number of surfers that were coming up. Your colleague on the broadcast, Jesse Mendez, was one of the shining lights of the Brazilian Storm when it was happening. So they have so much depth. I think they're going to be okay for a period of time. But also, action creates reaction, right? So I think you're seeing strong cases coming from Australia, strong cases coming from Hawaii, from other parts of the world that have risen up to challenge the Brazilian Storm. But good question. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of it. But Mitch, what do you think about that?
No, I 100% agree. I think the question is valid, though, as you mentioned, especially with the absence of Gabe. I think that's really the biggest question mark right there. And, I think Gabe probably got pushed by John and Kalohe and his generation a lot more than we've probably seen so far, in the last 2 or 3 years. Not to say that he hasn't performed well, he has. But, those were his guys. And if you look at the overall globalization and how real worldwide it's become, there's 7 different nationalities, including Hawaii, in the top 10. And that to me is very significant. Whereas before, I think it was 2018, 2/3 of the tour were Brazilian. And we're seeing a shift in obviously, the resurgence of a couple of superpowers within the sport of surfing. I think the US made a big push. Hawaii has made a big push to come back as well. I think Australia's having a lot of influence once again. But when we start seeing more Asian countries and Europe really become those global superstars that we're expecting from them, I feel like eventually we're just going to have a mixed bag on the world tour. And, Leo has been doing a lot of that. I think both Rio and Kanoa have a lot to do with that. And there's still more guys on the Challenger Series. And even the regional QS scene is really star-stuffed. And Mateus Hurdy just won a QS 6000 over there in Matasias. He's looking to be back on the Challenger Series. He was a couple of spots away from qualifying. So, no, I don't think that the Brazilian Storm is away at any point, but I do think there's a changing of the tides when it comes to different generational shifts, and it happened in the 90s with the United States. It eventually became the Aussie thing in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, and since then it's been the Brazilian dominance, but I feel like there is a possibility of that changing. That being said, 7 out of the last 10 men's world champions have been from Brazil. So, you still have number 1 in the world being from there. And to me personally, I think the Iago Dora is going to be in the final 5 for the first time. I think we're probably going to have at least 2 Brazilians in the Lexus WSL finals over there in Fiji.
I love it. Well, thanks to everyone that wrote in at the lineup pod with those questions. Great questions. If we didn't get to those today, be sure to keep those going because we will answer in the DMs. We love talking to you. And Mitch, it was great chopping it up with you. We have a big couple of weeks happening. We've got the Bonsoy Gold Coast Pro, maybe some other news in there as well. And I'm sure you and I are going to catch up very, very soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Dave. And, to all of our listeners out there, we appreciate the support and enjoy the Bonsoy Gold Coast Pro.